Your time and your attention. My delegation and myself came for a relatively short visit to India. The UNIC is about to wrap up. The purpose of the visit was to seek for allies. Seek for allies in the process of transformation, the process of big changes in the life of the United Nations and in the life of the earth, on the world. India has a vision how this world should look like and how India's role should look like in this changing world. The United Nations has a vision also how this world should change by 2030 and beyond. And we are working very hard to make it happen in the genocide. In my meetings with Prime Minister Modi, with Foreign Minister Jaishankar, with the Energy Minister Puri, and some other officials, we are very, very productive. The level of support, level of understanding, level of strategic resonance exceeded all my expectations. I invited the Indian government not only to play a part in the March first UN Water Conference since 1977, but to be one of the leading players. And I was very happy that the government has accepted this invitation. So we are looking for the Indian participation. I also invited the government of India to be a very active negotiating partner in 16 negotiating processes that are going on in the General Assembly of the United Nations. 13 out of the 16 negotiating processes are about transformation. How are we going to change the UN? How are we going to change the international relations, international cooperation, and consequently, how are we going to change this world? And I'm very happy to inform you that the government of India is on board.
Thank you, Excellency. We now take a round of questions. If you could please raise your hand. With apologies in advance, we won't be able to take everybody, but we'll try as much as possible. Thanks now.
So you've seen the Ukraine war. It's lasted a year or so. What role can India play in bringing it to an end?
We'll take a few more questions. Yes. Could you do the mic? Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. This is Hanima from ABT Live. Just trying to understand, of late we have heard our External Affairs Minister Jaishankar talking about the fact that UN has become a mechanism which is frozen in time, and he talks also about the fact that the expansion and the reform process is basically going nowhere. What are your views on that? Thank you.
Can we just take a couple more from this side? Why don't you?
My question is 21 countries, since you are a water expert, 21 countries in India have run out of groundwater as of 2021, and 4 of them are very major cities. So how can we partner with UN or with other world bodies to overcome or to handle this kind of a situation?
Thank you. We take one last question in this round.
So, Mr. Kurusmet, I'm Abhishek Jha from State University. My question is with you is regarding this cross-border terrorism that India has been raising at multiple platforms, especially in the United Nations Security Council. Did you have any conversation regarding this cross-border terrorism with Prime Minister Modi or External Affairs Minister? Did he raise this question? And also, what is your opinion on this issue?
Thank you. We have the President respond to this transfer. So would you?
If I may start from the last one, we have not discussed it, Prime Minister Modi. So the cross-border terrorism was not on the agenda today, but I'm fully aware how important this issue is in this country and in some other parts of the world. on the UN reform, and it was a question, I think, under the UN reform, you referred to the reform of the Security Council, mostly. Though the UN reform is a very, very broad one, which includes the General Assembly, ECOSOC, the Secretariat, UN agencies, and the Security Council itself. But usually in India, the topic number one is how the Security Council reform could look like in the near future, and whether or not India can become a permanent member of the Security Council. The bad news that this reform negotiations have been going on for almost 17 years. The good news that last September, 73 heads of state and government demanded in their speeches that the Security Council reform should be given a special impetus and it should achieve its results. So there is a push, there is a need, there is a demand from the side of the membership. I nominated 2 new co-chairs of the so-called intergovernmental negotiations that is responsible to deal with the reform of the Security Council, and the negotiations are just about to start. I wish I would be in the position to promise you what will be the outcome of the negotiations, but you may know that it's a so-called membership-driven process. It means that the General Assembly President creates some conditions, convenes the negotiations, but the content of the negotiations is and will depend on the willingness of the member states to make compromises in order to achieve concrete results. I am hopeful because the world's need it, and because the Security Council in the present form today is paralyzed. And it takes us to paralyzed, dysfunction. It takes us to the question you posed on Ukraine. We discussed the war in Ukraine, the issue of the war in Ukraine with Minister Jaishankar. And it is one of the issues why it's quite obvious that the Security Council must be reformed. The Security Council has been created in 1945 in order to be the prime responsible organ and body to make sure there will be no wars, no major conflicts in the world, or the conflicts should be resolved by peaceful means. Now what we are seeing, one permanent member of the Security Council has committed an aggression against its neighbor and annexed part of its neighbor's territory, and the Security Council is not in the position to take any decision since the start of the war because of the veto power in the hands of the given permanent member of the Security Council. India has done a lot to advance both the Security Council reform, and India was very active in all Ukraine-related issues, both in the Council and in the General Assembly. But let me add something else that is not necessarily an Indian role, but might be interesting for your readers. The UN activities are mostly, for the time being, mostly focusing on humanitarian problems, issues in Ukraine, and issues related to food security. Ukraine and Russia are providing about 30-35% of the global supplies, global exports of grain. If a war starts, as it happened in the last February, and the grain exports stopped from Ukraine and consequently from the southern part of Russia, it means 30% of the global supplies disappeared from one day to another. It sent up the prices of the grain 2, 3, 4 times higher and caused immense suffering in many countries, particularly in the most vulnerable ones, even 10 or 15,000 kilometers away from the war zone. So therefore, the United Nations efforts were focusing on how to make sure that the grain export and agricultural export and fertilizer exports from Ukraine and Russia can be continued. It was not easy. The General Assembly has invested a huge amount of political capital, brought together Ukraine, Russia, Turkey, and the UN Secretariat. The deal was done, and then it was even renewed, and until March, if I'm not mistaken, this export is guaranteed. The other area where the UN is active in the Ukraine crisis is humanitarian and prisoners swap. From time to time, the prison exchange is taking place with a very active UN participation. Last but not least, let me mention you that what has not yet happened, but the UN is ready to act if and when the necessity comes. All wars come to an end. When the end of the war is in close vicinity, there should be a ceasefire, there should be negotiations, and there should be a deal. If the warring parties feel it appropriate and timely, the UN is and will be ready, including the General Assembly, to help the parties coming together, start negotiation, start concluding ceasefire, if they want and when they want.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will just take 2 more questions. I'll take one
Yeah.
from this side.
Writer, our External Affairs Minister recently said that the permanent members of the UN Security Council, they don't seem too much in a hurry for reform. Do you share that assessment? Because you just said yourself that the functioning of the UNSC has been paralyzed. Our External Affairs Minister recently stated that the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council don't seem to be in a hurry for reform. Do you share that assessment? Thanks.
You spoke about one P5 member, Russia, going against its neighbor in a form of aggression that they've shown. There's also another P5 member. I mean, you said that this is directly, of course, related to peace and security in the world. Another P5 member, China, has been blocking the listing of a lot of terrorists on and off. Last year, it blocked 4 of them, which was pushed finally in the US. That's also directly related to peace and security. Do you think the accountability of P5 members should be much higher under such circumstances?
We'll take this for now, if you have time, then we will do another round.
There is a common perception that the UN Security Council reform cannot proceed because of the position of the P5, the permanent 5 members of the Council. And traditionally, I would say it was very close to reality because the P5 were not too enthusiastic about the Security Council reform. Now, interesting, all declared that they are ready to consider the reform of the Security Council. But let's be more pragmatic. In order to ask the P5 or the Security Council itself to ratify, to accept, first and foremost, a proposal coming from the General Assembly to approve the proposal reform from the General Assembly, there should be a resolution in the General Assembly on the reform. It has never happened. The General Assembly itself has always been very much divided. The 193 countries were so divided that they could never achieve a point that there is a package, that is our understanding, that is our compromise, that is what we propose for the Security Council for the consideration. So before we say that the P5, one of them, or some of them, would say yes or no to the proposal, I think the first hurdle to jump over is the division among 193 countries. There are at least 5 negotiating groups, and they are mutually neutralizing each other. That's why I judge to all of them and to all member states, asking them if we take the Security Council reform seriously, they need to decide whether or not they will be ready to compromise, they will be ready to change their position if and when and maybe later, your position yes, how and now.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think there was one related question on water. Accountability of the P5 members.
It is coming up in many ways. It is one of the major drivers of the discussions when member states are speaking about the necessity of the reform of the Security Council. Because the P5 have special powers in order to play special particular role in keeping peace and keeping security in the world. The veto has been granted in the Charter 77 years ago, not in order to block issues, but in order to encourage each other to work better and further. Now it has turned around, the veto is being used to block issues. Therefore, many member states are saying that we delegate 15 countries to the Security Council, 5 on a permanent basis, 10 elected. We want them to represent us, represent the whole world. And it's not only rights and privileges, but it's also a responsibility. Responsibility and accountability. And when they discuss the reform of the Security Council, the issue of accountability comes up very, very frequently. I'm sure if we can make progress on the reform, it will be done.